Welcome to the Big Red Arrow Club Roundtable, episode number 1. And if you're not familiar with the Big Red Arrow Club YouTube channel, it's essentially a collection of like-minded retro tech and retro gaming YouTubers. And we're putting out collaborative content with our thoughts on all things YouTube, as well as stuff that's kind of more in our own wheelhouses to do with technology and gaming. And in this one, we're going to be talking about YouTube's upcoming advertising policy changes, which is something that's going to affect all of our channels. And essentially, we all received an email basically stating that anyone who has monetization enabled on YouTube or monetization enabled on specific videos will automatically be getting pre-roll and post-roll ads shown on those videos, which we're not in a position to be able to turn off, which is quite a big change. And we're also going to be talking about the recent anti-AdBlocking messages that some people have been getting. And yeah, that's pretty much the topic of this roundtable. So I will introduce the individual members that are partaking tonight. We have Naoki's Retro Corner. Give us a wave. We have Polymat from the other side of the pond, all the way over in America. And of course, we have the wonderful Goldfish on Games and his fantastic beard.
Hello. So I hold two thoughts in my mind. One is, when it comes to advertising, YouTube has a vested interest in continuing to make money. And so if we think about things in the way that, is YouTube going to do anything to detriment us as the creators, our ability to make money? You know, I don't think they do it, right? Because they have the same, they have the same playground as we do, right? We just share in essentially the money that they're making. The other part of it, though, is if your main goal on YouTube is not to make money, it's to have a good user experience, then the new changes probably will detriment, right? Because I know that one of the reasons that, I wanted to make sure that I turned on monetization when I could is because I wanted my users to have a good user experience. And for those of you who don't know, unless you turn on monetization, you're at, there's still ads, but if you don't monetize, you don't have control over when the ads are displayed, right? Or if there's a pre-roll or if there's a post-roll. And these changes, I think, enforce, right? I think we're still going to have control over the ads within the videos, but we can no longer, turn off advertising before or after or things like that too. And so I would argue that probably would detriment user experience, because I have some videos that I just don't want to show advertising. It's not that I'm sponsored or anything like that. It's just that it's one of those sets that I just don't want to show. And we will no longer have that ability.
On my own videos, I tend to enable pre-roll and post-roll on all of them anyway. And I'll only enable mid-rolls if it's a much longer video. Obviously, this decision doesn't affect mid-rolls anyway, but the reason I do that is because I have this theory that I think a lot of us are kind of on board with, that YouTube's obviously going to push the videos that make it the most money, and if you want that kind of wider reach, then you basically have no choice but to enable them anyway. Obviously, there are certain topics and certain things where advertising isn't really appropriate, and obviously it's unfortunate that that's being taken away, but Naoki and Goldfish, what settings are you using at the moment? Are you monetized or are you in the partner program?
I'm not privileged enough to be in the partner program, unfortunately, but I think one of the things that I do have experience with is being a viewer, because even though I pay for premium, my partner doesn't. And so if we're watching something on her account, we'll usually get adverts coming across, like when we're watching it on the TV or on her phone or something like that. And I think it's one of those things where adverts are one of those areas where it doesn't matter how good your video is. If the adverts are annoying or they're very long or they're repetitive for whatever reason, someone's going to just turn off YouTube. And, in the end result, the actual creator ends up getting hurt because they've just lost a view, or their viewership, their watch retention gets just cut off at that point. So I think I can understand why YouTube are doing it. And I do agree with Matt on that they need to do something about it. But at the same time, it is a bit of a double-edged sword, especially because some people just abuse the advert system. There are some adverts that we've seen where, for whatever reason, it's a 30-minute long advert of some presentation, like some like tech talk, which just doesn't make sense, and you immediately skip on that.
I mean, I'd have a follow up on that one to ask. Do you think it detriments individual creators? Because if you're not on premium, which a lot of people are not, right? I think if last time I looked, only about 15 to 20% of the revenue that I get on my videos is from premium subscribers. So its vast majority are not premium. But I think my question would be is, for those of people who aren't on premium and are seeing advertising, does that affect an individual creator? Like, do you go to watch a video, see an advert, then skip the whole video altogether? Because if you went to the next one, wouldn't you see a similar advert, right?
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's one of those things, like, it depends. If you get like a 30-second advert or something longer for what's effectively a 12-second video, you're not going to put the investment into skipping the advert, because unless the short video is, the meme, whatever it is worth the wait, you're not going to invest. And if I'm going to watch something that's long form, it's usually going to be on my own account, because it's going to be something I want to watch, not what my partner wants to watch.
I've always put this sort of the pre-roll and post-roll videos on, but one of those, you're saying that, if someone starts watching that and goes, oh no, I'm not going to sit through this advert, I'm not even sure if that would even count towards like your click-through rate or anything like that, because they've not even started your video yet, technically. So it's not as if it's like dropped off within the first second.
I'd argue it would, because YouTube has this horrible thing where when you hover over the video, rather than it just being a GIF of the video being played, it is actually playing the video. And if you hover off, you get a negative viewer retention, because the viewer has watched the intro even though they haven't.
If you go through your YouTube history, I went through it quite recently, and I was like, what are all of these videos? I don't remember watching these. And it's actually stuff that I've just hovered over for a few seconds on the homepage, and they actually go into your history. I think if it's over a couple of seconds. So they're definitely counting them as views as far as a casual viewer is concerned.
I've never seen that in mine, but it's I don't tend to look in the history that much, and usually if my mouse pointer's over a sort of thumbnail, I'm going to click on it anyway. But
I don't know if it's a very recent change, or maybe it's just me.
It's been like that for I'm going to say it's been like that for a couple of years now, because I mean, YouTube have been doing, like, playing the video previews for about as long as I can remember. So probably the last couple of years.
I don't think I probably have seen it, because quite honestly, the amount of time I spend on YouTube on my desktop is minimal, right? I'm either on my phone or I watch it on TV.
To me, it's worse on the phone, because when you're scrolling through and you're going through your phone, yes, this is an empty case. When you're going and scrolling through your phone, I find that even when I'm going through the list, it's trying to play every single video that's in my feed. It's like, I don't want to see most of these things that you're recommending me. Whereas on my desktop, I'll go onto YouTube, and I'll go into my subscriptions, or I'll go onto the homepage, and I'll have all the videos with just their thumbnails. And if I see something I want to click on or want to watch, I just go over to it, and then just click it, and then just start watching it. So I find it's worse on mobile than it is on the desktop.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I'm curious. So, question for the group, overarching, is this good or bad?
As far as I'm concerned, personally, like I say, I have that setting enabled anyway. I think the big change here is actually that it includes skippable and non-skippable ads. And I know people have very strong feelings on non-skippable ads. Now, I actually enabled them quite a long time ago on my channel, against my better judgment, because, like I say, I have this whole theory about YouTube pushing things further, and it's all about increasing reach and that kind of stuff. And I suppose it does put everyone, who was against that before on kind of a level playing field with people like me. Is that detrimental to me because now I've got more competition? Or, I can certainly see how it would be, a negative as far as viewers are concerned. But if it's happening on all videos, and potentially it, could potentially push more people towards premium, and What would be nice would be if they actually reduced the cost of premium and kind of unbundled it with, from YouTube Music and kind of offered a cheaper option for that if they are going to be pushing more and more people in that direction.
Probably more looking at raising the price rather than lowering, right?
Yeah, do we actually feel that YouTube Music like has an added benefit, or was that just like a throw in to help them justify raising or a larger cost for premium? Because like I have never ever used YouTube Music, and I don't plan on it.
I have been a YouTube Premium subscriber for a good, like, probably over 2 years now. I have opened the YouTube Music app a grand total of 1 time, and that was by mistake.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got YT Studio and YT Music next to each other on my phone on Android, and I only ever open music by mistake and very, very quickly close it again.
I tried to uninstall it and then found out you couldn't.
Oh, I hate it when you get applications like that. I just think that YouTube were trying to push YouTube Music as a competitor to Spotify, but I think they've missed the mark because Spotify was just better at every point. Because I don't know how the technology behind Spotify versus YouTube Music works, but I always found that YouTube Music, and this is probably back in 2017 when I actually tried it, it always buffered the videos or even the music, so you're still playing the YouTube video behind it, you're just not getting the actual video, and that would be fine except for the fact that when you're out and about, Spotify will download the tracks as you're going, sort of pre-buffering the queue, so if you do lose internet connection, it's not going to matter. Whereas at least back then, when you were on YouTube Music, if you lost internet, it just stopped working.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much investment they've put into music. To be honest, it kind of seemed like, hey, look, we're getting a lot of traction with videos, with music videos. We're getting a lot of traction with music artists. We probably have an easy path right to a music service. So it probably wasn't a strategic play. It was probably an opportunistic play, and I think it shows, right? Because there's a lot of services that just do it, to your point, much better. Like Spotify was built to be a streaming service from the ground up, right? So I think one of the interesting things would be to say is really talk through like what are our strategies like for the group, how do we look at monetization versus the advertising, the strategy, things like that. I think that'd be interesting to know, because I think a lot of YouTubers approach it in very different ways.
I agree, because you have to do it to make it so that your channel can expand. So even if it's someone like me, who I'm just doing this more as a hobby than I am trying to get onto the YouTube bandwagon, it is something where I will still have to consider it when the time comes. Otherwise, YouTube just won't push the videos, and it's kind of corporate suicide.
It's very interesting in your case, actually, because obviously YouTube puts ads on channels that aren't in the partner program. So in your case, there are ads appearing on your videos and you don't have any control over it at all, which is one of the reasons I kind of really, really push to obviously get the watch hours and stuff up. But it's really, really difficult when you're kind of at that phase where you're not quite in the partner program yet. And I think they're making it even more difficult for people by just shoving ads into people's videos willy-nilly and giving them no control over the actual timing of them.
I've not had any feedback saying, oh, this ad was annoying or whatever. But also, I don't ever see anything to do with that. I only see just the video performance data. So it might be different for yourselves who are in the partner program, but I haven't had anything bad come of it. But then I have not much choice, so maybe I'm not looking, or I'm just not caring.
I think from a user point of view, they just expect adverts on all videos. And from their point of view, they don't know if you're in the partner program or not. They don't know if you're actually gaining anything from those adverts. So I think everyone just assumes that if there's adverts, you're gaining money. Because at one point, that was how it used to be. Only people in the partner program got adverts, and then they started slipping them onto people who weren't, and that's become the norm. And now they're also sort of enforcing certain adverts as well, where before you could people were joining the partner program so they could turn them off because they didn't want adverts on their things, on their videos.
Do you guys think then people are becoming more used to seeing adverts and they're treating YouTube more as an alternative to something like Netflix?
Well, personally, I know that I am kind of canceling some of the streaming subscriptions and watching more YouTube, right? Because I feel that that's where I get kind of the most benefit. Now, don't get me wrong, I like some of the, like the AAA, kind of like the big, high spend TV shows and things like that on Apple and other streaming platforms. But like, I find myself more and more attracted to YouTube because usually it's things that I want to learn about, right? Because there's just so much good content there, some things that I don't know that I want to dig into. And that really doesn't happen, I don't feel, in any other kind of streaming services. There's not more like tutorials or educational things, or if you wanted to do a deep dive in astronomy or physics or things like that. Like I don't see it. So from a personal perspective, that's absolutely happening with me. And I think it's probably a reason why YouTube is still around and is still big, right? Because they offer a differentiated, piece of content. So I'd be really interested to see if there's any numbers on YouTube's subscriber counts versus kind of the decline in some of the streaming services that we've seen recently.
What I've heard or read from some other people is that YouTube has pretty much always been the majority of network traffic and stuff. YouTube is significantly higher than all the streaming platforms, and it always has been. So it's not a case of YouTube's taking viewing time away from Netflix and the like. It's been more a case of that Netflix had been taking time away from YouTube.
If you look at some of the really big channels like Mr. Beast and the like, and obviously his videos get like hundreds of millions of views, and you have to think, if you compare that to normal sort of broadcast TV or Netflix and the like, that it's got to be sort of an order of magnitude bigger than anything on any of those sort of other services. I mean, YouTube's the primary source of entertainment in our household. I mean, literally every night we'll sit down in front of the TV, and rather than sort of watching broadcast TV, we'll just fire up the YouTube app and just sort of catch up on all of our regular channels. So, I mean, I signed up for Premium pretty much as soon as it was available in the UK, and we've had it ever since.
The way I've seen YouTube, I've seen it evolve over the years. Netflix, for ages, well, basically since it's been around, has always been about movies and TV series, but like professionally produced stuff. But when YouTube originally started out, and even into like the 2010s, I always saw it as more of a you put your hobbies on there kind of thing. You did get stuff like music videos and things later on, like beginning during the 2010s, but I think it's been since 2010 onwards I've started seeing the professional side of it growing. So now you'll see people, actual TV presenters like Richard Hammond and others doing YouTube videos now, because it is a legitimate platform. It's a legitimate thing where a lot of people, not just people who go on the internet to enjoy other people's projects or other people's stories, will go to now.
Yeah, I mean, the production quality of some of the stuff on YouTube now is just way above and beyond. I mean, it's overtaken TV in a lot of cases, and it's up there with Netflix and the other streaming platforms. Some of it's just absolutely amazing, and obviously that's the kind of stuff that we kind of have to compete with as well nowadays, which is another thing that makes our lives difficult.
I think it's easier to, though, right? I mean, sure, there's channels that have like, red cameras and teams of editors and things like that. But like, quite honestly, with like an Adobe Suite subscription and a nice iPhone, like honestly, I shoot all of my videos 4K 60 frames a second on my iPhone, right? Like I've got like a little bit of lighting set up, right, that I can configure, and it's my iPhone, and that's it. And I think that, I produce decent quality stuff. And I think so it's become a lot more, while there has been kind of a huge explosion in professional kind of content, I think there's also like the accessibility of being able to produce high quality content. And I'm sorry, I want to differentiate high quality content versus like production quality, right? Because there are so many people, so many channels that have amazing content that they're not shooting in 4K. They're not, doing cinematic shots, and they're not, but it's just so good, right? Like I would go back and I look at kind of like LGR's early stuff. I would watch that today, right? Like him and his Sony Handycam, like, like pointing at like that is still so entertaining. And one of the reasons I think why his channels continue to grow, and he has gotten leaps and bounds on production quality, but like he has always done, to me, like really good high quality content that is compelling. And so I think that having production quality may give you a little bit of an edge if everything else is equal, right? But like focusing on like, I think quality, quality of your content, seeing the passion of what you're doing come through, like that's, to me, I think that's, I don't know. I kind of took the stance when I came into this thinking like, I'm going to do this in the way that I want to do it, and like to showcase how I want. And if it doesn't resonate, that's fine. I'm going to keep doing those projects. I'll just stop shooting videos about it. Right. But like, so this was for me a little bit of an experiment that way.
I think as well, that brings up another question, and also to sort of move back to the original topic as well. If YouTube are doing this, and they're probably doing this to push more people onto YouTube Premium, do you think that, like, obviously the price, we all agree the price should probably be less, they should just drop YouTube Music, but should they have a look at the whole monetization program? Because a lot of people are going back to using Coffee or Patreon, because YouTube revenue is just, unless you're Mr. Beast levels of video content and viewers, you're just not going to get a stable or decent income from it.
I mean, Reese, you use Patreon and YouTube memberships, right?
I do.
What was behind that decision?
People asking for it, essentially. I set up Patreon because one of my regular viewers got in touch and said, "Oh, when are you going to be setting up a Patreon?" And I thought, well, I suppose it's something that I'm going to do eventually, because that's what channels do. It's at some point during their lifetime. So I thought, well, why not now if there's demand for it? And then they signed up, and a couple of other people signed up once they noticed it was available. I have to say the experience from our point of view is so much better on Patreon. Just the tools, for getting the information out there, and the authorship side of things. I mean, YouTube channel membership stuff it's essentially just posts that are only visible to members, and it's incredibly limited what we can actually post in there and how we can kind of communicate with people. There's no sort of DM type thing like you get with Patreon. So the experience with Patreon is so much better, and that's evidently why it's so much more popular, which is a bit strange, because obviously that's revenue that YouTube themselves are kind of missing out on by not offering that level of service. And you'd think with all of their resources that they would be able to match that. And it's far more popular with viewers as well, I guess, because of all of that extra functionality. But I guess you kind of have to offer all of them, just because different people have different preferences. It is quite a bit of overhead for me to obviously, because I offer stuff like early access to videos and that kind of thing. It's a lot more overhead for me to have to write separate posts for Patreon and Coffee and the YouTube channel member page thing, and have to remember to sort of manage all of that. But ultimately it's all kind of a necessary evil, because ad revenue isn't what it was 10 years ago. Not quite sure what the reasons are for that. I have my suspicions that they're heavily subsidizing shorts. Shorts notoriously don't really make any money as far as advertising is concerned. Advertisers don't really want to advertise on them because people don't retain anything when they watch them, and so
they kind of shot themselves in the foot, because you can skip past the ads. If you get a YouTube short ad, and it's gone.
I've been thinking about this, and for a little while, because I've heard like 10 years ago it used to be so much more, but I think it might be a sort of a victim of its own success. Like, more people are on YouTube, more people are monetized than ever before, which means whatever limited pot there is for paying out to the creators has to be shared by more and more people every year. Because, like, if the videos were monetized before, they'll continue to be monetized, particularly if they're still being viewed. So older videos are still generating money for those creators unless they delete them, and there's more people coming in. And I don't know if the income trajectory of YouTube itself continues to grow, because I remember for a while they were always saying that YouTube ran at either a loss or barely broke even most of the time. It was basically paying for itself and the creators, and didn't really generate a lot of profit for Google, or Alphabet now. It's probably easier to say. But I don't know if that's still the case these days. I don't know if they've released any of that information in a while. So I think it's possibly just and saying, oh, if we want to try and get the money for creators up again, it's either more invasive adverts, longer adverts, or as they're trying to do, obviously, or make it harder for people to join the creator program, or but where they seem to be going the opposite way, trying to get more people into it sooner by dropping some of the requirements.
I think you got a good point, and because I think YouTube has probably an exaggerated problem of some of the other services that are pretty new, right? Is that there is such a backlog of content on YouTube, right? Like you can go back 10 years and still watch things, to where if you look at a streaming service like a Netflix or things like that, right? Like they pay licensing fees in order to get shows. And so only the biggest ones, the best hits, will ever be kind of relicensed or things like that, where YouTube just has a tank of all of their content is there. Well, so viewership doesn't necessarily translate to new eyeballs. So just because there are more views being had on YouTube, than ever, it may be that because if you're an advertiser, right, you don't want to serve the same ad to the same person. And so if people are engaging more on YouTube, right, like they're watching more videos, more things like that, I think at some point it's got to get saturated, because otherwise you're at risk of serving the same ad to the same person multiple times, which happens, right? But I think there's a kind of a law of diminishing returns that tends to happen when you've got such a backlog of content.
Oh, I remember before we had YouTube Premium, I think it was originally called YouTube Red, I think, for the longest time. But before we had any kind of paid or premium option in the UK, obviously we were watching a lot of YouTube on the TV, and we actually got the ads. And there was one that just played we went through a phase of a few weeks, and it just seemed to be the same ad over and over and over again. And it was very short. It was very, very pixelated and very poor quality. And it was very loud compared to the actual videos that we were watching. And it was enough to kind of drive us away from it. And it was like, well, if we're going to have to put up with this, for much longer, and there's no paid option available to make it go away, should we be looking at ad blockers or just not watching YouTube at all? Thankfully, they do seem to have fixed that. But, that was only a few years ago.
And there's another question. They're obviously now notably blocking ad blockers. And I reckon that this is another thing to try to push more people into going into buying YouTube Premium.
The question is, do we think that YouTube actually makes more money out of premium or adverts?
I think they would make more money out of adverts, because a lot more people, like the likes of BMW and Mercedes, for example, will pay to get their adverts put onto something like Mr. Beast's channel, where it's going to be seen by absolutely millions of people.
I don't know. I take a different view on that, because if their business model is that premium makes less money than advertising, I wouldn't think that they would have launched it in the first place. Right? And to me, if we talk about pushing people to premium, I think that from an ad blocker standpoint, honestly, I would do the same thing if I were YouTube. Because what you're effectively doing is you're effectively saying, okay, if the people that are watching that we know for sure are not willing to watch advertising, then there's absolutely no way you're going to monetize those people. There's no way that those people are ever going to have in any way support the platform. And so what I think that they're doing, and this, I don't know, might be controversial take, but what I think that they're doing is saying, okay, for those people who use ad blockers that are on the line, right, that say, you know what, if it's the difference between not watching YouTube and paying to watch YouTube or actually watching advertisements, I'm just going to turn off my ad blocker or buy premium, then they retain those users. But for the never ads people, right, that are being like, I'm never going to watch ads, I'm never going to pay for it, YouTube loses nothing. And in fact, they gain by having those users leave their platform, right? Because they're no longer using the bandwidth and all of the infrastructure needed in order to serve video to users who are never going to contribute to paying for it.
I think there's quite a big precedent here as well with Netflix. Obviously, a while back they announced that they were going to be cracking down on password sharing, and there was quite an uproar online, and people saying, "Oh, I'm going to cancel my account," and all of this kind of stuff. And then after they'd actually made that change and the dust actually settled, it turned out that the number of subscriptions had actually increased. And they were actually making more money off the back of that decision. I know in my case that my mum, who lives just down the road from me, was using my password and using my Netflix account. And when they brought that in, she started to get the message saying, you're not in the main household kind of thing. You're going to have to sign up for your own account. She actually did go through it and sign up for her own account, just because she watches so much Netflix that was that was good value for money for her. And essentially, the reason she wasn't paying for it is because she didn't have to, not because she didn't want to. But if they're not going to force you to pay for it and they're going to let people share accounts, then why not? And I think it's very similar with ad blockers and YouTube. It's like, well, you can use an ad blocker and it's very easy to do, so why not? I know obviously there are those of us who choose to pay for premium, but take that option away, and I think actually quite a lot of people will kind of look at it and say, well, actually, I do use this service a lot, and it's probably quite good value for money. So I guess I'll start paying for it.
Like, nobody's going to start up a new free service video platform today and just say, like, you know what, I'm going to eat the infrastructure and the streaming costs, and we want a large group of people who I'm never going to be able to monetize. Like, I just don't see that happening. And so I see this as, honestly, it's a good business decision on YouTube's part.
Yeah, I find it interesting as well with like all the other platforms, because every time I see a channel that is professional, is one I like, it seems like they all end up coming up with their own platform or their own streaming service, like Nebula or I'm forgetting what the other one. That's not the one I was thinking of, but there's multiple, there's loads out there. And I see it all the time, and you think to yourself, oh, maybe I could check it out. But then it's just another thing where you look at it, and I think this is where YouTube kind of takes Google's approach to things of offer it for free, and then it's very difficult to move away from it, because you have to pay for Nebula, you have to pay for other streaming services, and unless you know it's going to be good or useful, you just probably get put off because you'll have to pay for it. Whereas you kind of have a never-ending, you've basically got a WinRAR trial of YouTube, which continues for as long as you want until you get annoyed at the adverts enough.
I love the WinRAR reference, by the way. That was fantastic.
I just appreciate that LGR found the one copy of that had been bought.
Right? That was amazing.
You're on day 500 of your 30-day YouTube trial.
Yeah, but to your point, Naoki, I am dubious on anybody who stands up a new premium video service or streaming service and says, I can do it better. It's like, I'm sure there are tweaks, but quite honestly, as creators, we absolutely want to see better tools and things like that. But quite honestly, I'm here, right? I'm putting in videos, and I am a YouTube Premium subscriber. I do think it's a bit too expensive. I would like to see, have it for less, but right, I still think there's good value in it. And the other platforms, it's not like, it's like you need the reach in order for it to be attractive, right? And I don't see how other platforms can even get to that scale to where it would be attractive.
I think as well, the problem is it's kind of like the way Microsoft does things. Google has a massive data center presence, where these other places like Nebula and that, they have to pay the likes of Amazon Web Services or something akin to that. And storage, or even what's the word, egress charges are phenomenal. And Google can get away with doing it, like we were said, where YouTube is either working on a loss or is barely breaking even. Technically, yes, but they're being subsidized massively by the fact that Google isn't charging necessarily an egress for all of this content, whereas Nebula and the like are.
Yeah, they have, different regional points. They're essentially their own content delivery network, right? They have different points of presence around the world to make sure that high quality video can be streamed wherever. But yeah, I mean, from financial standpoint, right, they probably do take into account some of those costs, but they can do it at cost, right? They don't have to upcharge for it. The second you have a streaming service that, needs to be built on top of a global platform, right, there's significant costs there.
I think the only viable alternative I've ever heard of is things, and I am not endorsing them, but I'm just saying them for reference, is places like Odyssey or Library, or things where there is no data center. There is a data center kind of thing going on, but it's distributed, it's federated. It's basically on a load of different machines rather than being on one huge or multiple huge data centers. But even then, you've still got costs behind that.
Honestly, I think the only company I could see, well, there's two companies that could challenge it, and one is probably more likely than the other. One would be Microsoft, just because they do have the data centers, and they did actually run a video platform back in the day as an alternative to YouTube before it was purchased.
Did they? I don't remember that one.
Yeah, they had their own alternative that didn't go anywhere really. And YouTube only really got big after it was bought by Google as well, because suddenly they had the money behind them to really go for it. And so I think Microsoft technically still run little bits of that, but mostly for stuff like SharePoint and all their other internal sort of stuff.
Is that something like that Microsoft Stream uses?
I think that's where this sort of lots of the tech that they initially wrote for that sort of ended up. But they did have their own one. But I think the only other company that could properly, who already do serve adverts, there's one company that's sort of doing lots of this stuff already and have a massive backing, and that's Twitch.
Yeah, Amazon.
Twitch could become, because they got Amazon behind them, they could, and they already do serve videos that been streamed previously, and you can upload videos to it, but it's just people don't treat it like YouTube. And I think with some tweaks, they probably could do.
Don't the VODs only last for like a couple of weeks?
By default, they only last a couple of weeks. But you can upload videos to them as well. So, but I think that's just more of a sort of... At the moment, they don't want Twitch to be a video on-demand service like YouTube.
I think there is a bit of a difference, though, because Twitch... The difference between streaming and having... videos on demand is that videos on demand require storing all of those videos for a perpetual amount of time, whereas if your Twitch VODs expire after a few weeks, then you have to store it, but you have to store significantly less data. And whilst you're streaming, I don't know the technical sides of Twitch, but I could imagine how it's almost sending the MPEG. I can imagine how it's almost sending the MPEG data from the streamer to all the different people from the one server, and it's just it's basically acting as a giant repeater, which you're going to pay for bandwidth, but you're not paying necessarily for storage, which is what YouTube has to do.
They've obviously got AWS behind them, which is possibly the biggest sort of cloud storage and stuff system behind it. Like, if they wanted to, they have the resource to do it. It's more, I think Twitch is treated more as its own independent company rather than being fully integrated with Amazon and AWS, and sort of treated as YouTube is. It's like, well, we can run a slight loss or a just about make a profit.
Yeah, I guess the point is that they've got all of the bits in place. All they need to do is literally just bolt a load of storage onto it, and they've essentially got YouTube. I know it's not quite the same, but as far as potential competitors go, they're definitely the closest. And if my experience with AWS is anything to go by, it's literally just a case of, log onto the dashboard and just drag the slider across. There you go. Now we've got loads of storage. Now we've got a YouTube competitor. So Bezos, if you're watching this, that's my suggestion to you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Exactly.
No one else came up with it before.
Yeah, I bet he's never thought of that.
Coming back to privacy and ad blocking specifically, right? Like, what's everybody else's view? I mean, I kind of went off on it, but what's everybody else's view on, is this the right thing for YouTube to do, right? And from a consumer standpoint, right? Are there any counters, right? Are there any counter arguments to why ad blocking is appropriate? Like I've heard a few. I've heard about malicious advertising and things like that. But what does everybody think?
I'm gonna take a stance of ad blockers, privacy tools for browsers has become unfortunately essential. On places like YouTube, I can still see a need for it. First of all, not everyone can afford premium. And there's workarounds by saying you're from places like India or whatnot, but some people have different codes that they have to live by. But I can also appreciate that some people, it's not that they don't want to watch adverts, it's that they don't want to trust watching adverts. And I say that because there are some adverts that might come up with topics that are uncomfortable for the viewer, and because you can say I don't like this ad, but it doesn't usually stop it being shown. If it is like distressing for someone, then I can see them turning on an ad blocker. I know it's a bit of a niche argument, but I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I mean, TV ads are just so heavily regulated as far as the actual content is concerned, and what's allowed to go out at certain times and that kind of thing. And it's much more kind of loosely defined as far as YouTube's concerned. And I mean, I was at a friend's house just the other night, and he doesn't have premium and doesn't block the ads, and he had videos running on his TV. He's very much the same as me. In fact, it's a bit strange considering he's one of these people who uses YouTube as like their main form of entertainment, but then he doesn't pay for premium or block the ads. And just the frequency of those ads, and there were some really, really sort of scammy looking ones for all sorts of, I mean, it was proper like, wish.com, bottom of the barrel technology stuff that they were trying to make out was like the latest and greatest stuff, and trying to push it on people. And it just,
I think that's the other thing as well, because like places like Temu, for example, we know that there's a lot of problems with Temu, but they can get away with putting their ads everywhere, especially plastered across YouTube, where I don't think they'd be able to get onto like any kind of mainstream television service because of what they do.
I think it's a reasonable thing to say that, like, all right, look, if you're gonna not allow us to block ads, then you need to get better at tools or at screening or at things, because, on a website, for example, right? If you're a major publisher and you want to serve ads on your website, you absolutely have the ability to say, here are my exclusions, right? I don't want these categories. I don't want these companies. I don't want, these types of things. And there's ranking and scoring, but from an advertising standpoint, I haven't seen any of those tools. And I took the bait, right? Like when I signed up, YouTube was like, hey, we'll give you a free $100 credit if you advertise with us, right? And so I'm like, all right. So I spent $100 and I boosted a video of mine, but there was no kind of controls on what categories of ads can be shown or limiting types of ads or things like that. So I agree. I think it's incredibly reasonable to say that, like, if you're gonna force people to, not use ad blockers, then you need more control, more moderation, more scrutiny over the ads that you show.
Yeah, because I don't think we have any control over what type of adverts we even have on our channel right now. So, like, you could be a particular channel and it could be showing adverts that's literally the opposite of what your channel stands for.
And we're even losing the ability to control the adverts by the fact that we now can't even just turn off ads entirely. I mean, there's something to say where if you want to put out a video that has just no monetization, so there's no adverts, like a super serious video, and I can name a few, but I'm not going to. You don't want people saying you're just making this video to make more money. You want to get the message across. And now you can't turn this stuff off. Now that message becomes less sincere. Like you said, people don't associate the fact that just because the advert is being showing, that advert's being shown to them for paying for the service that they're using. It's not paying the content creator.
And I think inherently people don't understand how advertising works, right? People have a misconception about how much money we make based off of ads. They have a misconception about how much control we have over advertising, like on both sides of it, like that we have either zero or all of it or things like that. And, you know, I don't know that it's reasonable to expect people to understand the ins and the outs of how advertising works, right? And so I agree. I think that's, you know, for people's first reaction is that I hear it on my video. Like if people actually knew how much I lose on the things that I buy and like the videos that I've made, right? But like all of the comments that are like, oh, you're just doing this for views and ad revenue. It's just like, okay, like, but I'm still like, 90% in the hole on this, right? Like, sure, I try to use it to offset the cost, but like, I couldn't, like, it would need to be such a big, like, explosion of, of views in order to cover my costs for most of these things. And look, maybe I'll get there in 5 years, 10 years if I have, a huge channel and lots of views. But yeah, like people automatically assume that like, oh, you just did this to make money or to do that.
And do you find that it influences how you're going to approach a certain topic? Whether it be a commenting on something that's going on or any kind of drama or, maybe just some kind of sensitive topic. Do you think, how am I going to come across like this, knowing that there's going to be adverts on there?
It's a good question. I think for me, the only thing when I'm shooting a video or I'm choosing to shoot a video, the only influence that has on me is honestly, it kind of makes me a little bit more diligent in the things that I'm doing. Because like, I'm like, I know that if I do this, I'm going to get yelled at, right? But what I won't say, like, for example, like if I show putting thermal paste on a CPU, right? That's like the ultimate no-no that people are just going to lose their minds. But also, right, like even things like if I don't show this part, I know I'm going to get a ton of questions about it. So I better show this part, right? But honestly, and it's probably, I am not in YouTube for the money. I do want it to help subsidize the projects that I do. And so, I make my decisions on that. But as far as the comments go, I don't really care. Right? Like I love seeing comments of people that love my videos and connect with my videos, but the comments of people that don't, right? Like I could care less. But it's the people that love and want to see the videos that influences, like, in some cases what I choose to film and the things that I do within those videos, because I want them to have a better experience, right? The people that are genuinely to enjoy the content, I want them to have a better experience and to be able to communicate that knowledge in my videos. But all of the negative stuff, couldn't care less.
I don't think adverts have ever played a part in my thinking when I've been making a video. I know some people, when they make the video, if they know it's going to be of a certain length, they'll try and put a natural break or something where they can put a mid-roll or whatever, so it doesn't feel like it's cutting halfway through a sentence or whatever. But I've never really thought about mid-rolls or anything like that. It's just beginning, end, that's fine. So when I'm making a video, it's not even on my radar. It's just like I have them at the beginning, the end, and just let the video be the video. And I don't think I've ever had anyone complain in the comments about adverts, or thankfully no one said, oh, you just made it for the money or whatever. Mostly because I think my views are low enough that no one ever considers that. Like I think of the two, noticed the other day that I've got two videos that have come close to paying off whatever the item was that was being shown. One of them is the most recent one, where it's like the video itself is made about £8 and the CD cost me 15. And the other one is the CD32 video, which these days people will be going like, how the hell's that paid it off when it's only made like £12 £25. Well, I bought it back in 2000 when it cost me 35 quid, including postage. So it like for most of the stuff I show, it doesn't even come close to paying. Most of it doesn't even come close to paying the postage on the item, let alone the item itself.
I mean, I'm not even going to bring up the object that's behind me, but that's a sunken cost fallacy right there.
But it's a passion project, right? Like that's
well,
that's
the thing.
videos.
But I'm not getting paid for it. Like I've got even if adverts play my videos, I ain't getting paid for it. So
Yeah.
No. The thing is, you'd be building that anyway if you didn't have the channel, surely.
well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like Matt's just said, it's a passion project. So it's just I was doing it, and I feel like, you know what, I'm going to just turn the camera on and see what happens.
Yeah.
I think that's the principle that I try to use, which is, you know, like if I would be doing this anyway, why don't I film it? But I don't, and I haven't. And there might be a time where I run out of projects or ideas or things like that, and I feel that I want to put out a video that I might look for something, but I don't see that happening for quite a while. I got a little bit of a backlog.
So, some very interesting takes on the subject of YouTube and advertising. Of course, if you have any thoughts of your own, please do let us know down in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and give us a subscribe to the channel as well. So, obviously, we are members of the Big Red Arrow Club, and we are regularly going to be putting out content along these lines. So, I've been Reese from the channel Control-Alt-Reese. You can find me on the usual socials on Twitter and all of that kind of stuff.
I've been Naoki from the YouTube channels Naoki's Retro Corner. You can find me by searching for my handle at NaokiSRC on YouTube and on Twitter.
I've been Matt at PollyMatt. You can find me on YouTube at PollyMatt or on Instagram at the PollyMatt.
And I've been the Goldfish from Goldfish on Games, and you can find me on YouTube under the same name and on Blue Sky as well.
And of course, I'll link all of those down in the description as always. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
We got to do the waving outro. Yeah.